What's up, everyone? It's your boy, Sad Nixon, and I'm coming at you today with yet another Secret Hitler tournament analysis video. Now that the tourney is all over, it's all said and done, we can do our analysis of the draft, just like we did last year. So, let's get started. So, just like I did last time, what I basically did here is I took a look at the draft order for everyone who was drafted in this tourney, and then I compared that to the points order that was created after all the games have been played. So basically, we're comparing how well someone was drafted to how well someone actually performed, and we're going to evaluate the captains, see how they did, see how it all worked out. So let's get started right off the bat by looking at the players who are basically the most, underdrafted. And what I mean by that is we're comparing right now the draft order to the points order, and by subtracting the two, we can find the difference between them. So if someone was drafted first, in theory, they should get the most points in the tourney. That would be a perfect draft. But if that person actually got, the fifth most amount of points, then there would be a difference of 4. So they'd be 4 points overdrafted. But let's look at underdrafted people right now who have a negative difference. And here we are. So these are the most underdrafted players, and we see Wowist right here at the top of the list. Wowist really did pretty awesome this tourney. Wowist managed to get 10 points, which is quite a bit, based based on the fact that they were only drafted 95th. This is pretty impressive, right? They were drafted almost last overall, but they really did really well. So they have a difference of 77 because their points order, they got 18th in points, and then their draft order was 95th. So that's a really big difference. I think that is a bigger difference. Yeah, that's a bigger difference than any of the differences that we saw last time. So this is one of the biggest kind of surprises that you could really imagine. Super big surprise from Wowist. We also see Joe Schmo up here again with a negative 59 difference. Really did really well. 11 points. Outperformed their 70th draft by a lot. Also, Joe Schmo became the first person, along with Div, to win 3 Secret Hitler tournaments with this tournament. So congratulations to Joe. ZZ Real Grizz, pretty underdrafted. Steven, Anna, the list goes on. And I was interested when I looked at this list if there were any people who really overlapped on this list from the same list from the last tourney. So were there any people who were underdrafted in both tourneys and outperformed their draft significantly? And it turns out there is. And although they have a different name on these two sheets, it's Akali or Ambition. So Ambition was underdrafted by 33 places last time, outperformed their draft pretty well. This time around, they also outperformed their draft by 40 places. So, yeah, a really awesome performance by Akali there, by Ambition. So, maybe you should stop underdrafting them. Whatever you have to say about Ambition, you cannot deny, definitely outperforms drafts. So, yeah, a lot of interesting names on here. A lot of people who were drafted really low but did really well. So, that's just how it goes. Let's take a look at some of the people who are right in the middle and were drafted very correctly. So, who was drafted most correctly? It's kind of an interesting question, right? So, looking at the very middle of things, we can see the person who was drafted most correctly is Arsar. So, Arsar was drafted 21st. Yeah, and then got 21st in points order. Look at that. That is pretty cool. Perfect draft by Tom there. Really performed exactly on expectations. Also around this area are 007 Bunny, performed just about as well as people thought they would. That's an interesting one because 007 Bunny is actually a 2K player who was drafted only 45th. So the judgment was kind of that they were very inflated, maybe, and that turned out to be kind of correct. They performed at the level that they should have. Andrew, Medusa, Kexi, who were all vice captains, all put on a very kind of standard performance where they performed pretty well, right around where you would expect. You can't really overperform very much if you're drafted in the first round anyway. So, they did their job for sure. Uh, so, yeah, some very good drafting being done by these captains right here in the middle. Awesome stuff. Okay, let's take a look at now the most overdrafted players. That is, of course, a pretty interesting one, right? Who is it? Okay, so the most overdrafted player, as you might have expected, turns out to be Bubbles. Bubbles, I'm sorry, it was a rough tourney for you. Played a bunch of games, but only ended up getting 0 points. Uh, and so that results in a difference of 74, so pretty big uh, difference between draft order and points order. They were drafted 16th. That happens sometimes. Just, luck factors in a lot, obviously. This will happen. Ryan Lockwood, in comparison to the other VCs, did not do quite as well and pretty much underperformed, only getting 4 points. So, despite their fifth place draft, didn't do too well. Paz is up here, Ant is up here, Z Factor, etc. Now, in terms of people who were on this list and also on the list from last tourney, I noticed Maury and Liberalist are both on the list. They both underperformed by, it looks like 28 places here. And last time they were also on the list. If we take a look, how much was it? Yeah, Maury underperformed by 40 points last time, and Liberalist by 42. So they underperformed by less. So that means they were drafted a little bit more accurately this time. There was maybe an adjustment, or maybe they just performed closer to their, skill level that the captains think they're at. But yeah, in any case, those are the overlap. Yeah, but again, if you're on this list, don't feel too bad. It's a lot of RNG in Secret Hitler, and it happens. Sometimes you're overdrafted, sometimes you're underdrafted. I think there were some people who were overdrafted last time and underdrafted this time, and vice versa. Uh, that's how it goes. So I also wanted to take a look at kind of the correlation between draft order and points and ELO order and points, these different correlations, just because I think it's interesting to look at on a chart. And we see here, this is comparing draft order to points. And there's a pretty nice correlation that you can kind of see, right? You can kind of see the linear formation, which is good. We want to see that. We see the outliers in here. These are the people who are plus 50 or negative 50. Yeah, so Ryan, Paz, Bubbles, Ant, Joe Schmo, Wowist. Wowist really up there. Basically, the farther above this line you are, the better you did in comparison to your draft, and the farther below the line you are, the worse you did. Yeah, pretty linear relationship there. I like to see it. If we go by ELO order, what do we see? Okay, a similar thing. Yeah, we still see it's a little bit flatter of a line, I think, and there's a little bit more chaos to it. But yeah, there's still something there. Here's an interesting one. How about Glyco order? So in this tournament, I created the Glyco metric, which basically looks at a player's past turning performance, and it creates a Glyco rating based on that. And that is how I ran my simulations for odds. That was factored in. So taking a look at that, let's see how that worked out. Whoa. Okay, it's a little bit all over the place. Yeah. So this is very interesting to see. Of course, we see a lot of kind of variance all over the place here. But that's okay. Part of the beauty of Glyco is that it has an uncertainty rating, which helps it calculate when it's not too sure. And a lot of these players, it's not too sure about because they haven't had much tourney gameplay before this point. So, uh, I don't think it's a huge deal that this looks all over the place, but as tourneys go on, as people play more and more tourneys, uh, these Glico values will eventually converge onto more true values, I think. But for now, it's okay. So I also wanted to, compare the kind of correlation between ELO and points and the correlation between draft order and points, just because I think that is a cool thing to do, basically comparing ELO to the captains. And it turns out that basically if you have the correlation between ELO and points, that is 0.44. So a pretty good kind of medium level correlation, but the correlation between draft order and points is negative 0.55. So this is a little bit more of a correlation, a negative correlation, of course, because draft order, lower is better. But basically we can see here that the captains, again, just like last year, are measurably better than ELO at predicting the performance of the players. And that is pretty cool to see. Now, I will say that captains are a little worse this time. Last time, the correlation between draft order and points was 0.59, I believe, almost 0.6. And the ELO to points correlation was just about the same, 0.44. So captains did just slightly worse this time at predicting player performance, but all in all, pretty close. Still definitely measurably better than ELO. So, they do know a little bit when players are inflated and deflated. The correlation between Glico and points, you can see, is 0.7, so it's not much of a correlation. So that might be a little bit of an indictment of my system, but I do think that, when you factor in the uncertainty ratings, the RD ratings, it probably wasn't that bad for my simulation to be using these, but, maybe I should reconsider in the future. Maybe ELO is actually just a better measure for doing the odds calculations in my simulation. That could be. Maybe I should actually try to create some metric of deciding probabilities based on draft order, because that is more correlated with the actual points. So, you never know. Would be interesting to think about. I also want to look at each team to see how well each team basically did in terms of the underdrafted or overdraftedness of their players. And we can see here that Friendship has a good -6. So they really, they picked some people who were on average, kind of underdrafted, a little bit underdrafted. And then on the high end, we see Shooters and Hooters. Got some people who, are on average 9 points overdrafted. So, pretty interesting. So you can see here, yeah, kind of a nice scale. 69 is right in the middle, -0.2, pretty much right on the money. Their players performed on average, pretty much as expected. Yeah, cool stuff. Very cool stuff. Now, I did want to make a note that I think the average ELO this tournament was a little bit higher. We had 3 teams where the average ELO was above 1800, which is pretty crazy. And last time, I think we only had 2 teams where that was true, and the other teams, had lower ELO, like lower in the 1700s as well. So yeah, definitely kind of a high ELO tournament this time. Um, so yeah, checking out the points distribution, we can see here. Now this is a little bit different from last time. Last time we had the point distributions that look like this. And the reason why this is different, I think, is because everyone had to play 2 games. So it was a lot harder to kind of bust completely and get 0 points. We see a big 0-point spike here. So yeah, there was more of a spike kind of in the middle here and less of a spike at 0 points this time because people got to play more games. I think that's great that people got to play more games. For ELO, yeah, here's our distribution. So, big peak in the kind of high 1700s. A little bit of another peak here at 2K. A lot of 2K players this tourney. Yeah, we can see here it's a similar graph, right? But it's a little bit kind of shifted up, I would say, and a little bit higher of a spike at 2K than last time. But yeah, cool stuff there. Very cool stuff. Of course, this does kind of have a little bit of a weird, bit to it because there's a few players that are like on new accounts and super deflated, but whatever. Manouche. And then here for the difference distribution. Oh, interesting. So yeah, there were a lot more people kind of right in the middle, and a lot less people on the fringes here than last time. And that could be because, again, more games played, more data, people get to express a performance that's closer to their true skill level. Uh, and that's cool. That's awesome. Now, the people who were outliers were, I think, farther outliers than they were last time. Uh, plus and minus 70 is pretty big. But on average, looks like, people were a lot closer to where they were supposed to be, according to their draft. So yeah, great job, captains. This is a great tourney. Hope this was interesting to look through all of this fun data. See you later.